don't skills or don't behaviors. This is specific to unstructured child-led playtime because some of them you'll see you need to use at particular times, right? The first one is unnecessary commands. So commands being, like any instruction, direction, however you frame it, that you give to a kid. Obviously, we need those, and we've spoken about how a goal would be to get kids to be more compliant for the first time with some of those directions or instructions. But this is specifically about unnecessary commands, right? So when we talk about commands or instructions, they can be quite indirect sometimes. So this is when we phrase and or like a suggestion. Hey, I think it's time to come pack away now. So that's like not being super direct. It's sort of the implication is there. The subtext is that yes, it is time to come back away, and you need to come back now. But the phrasing is more like a, "What do you think about this? I'm putting this on the table as an idea." Whereas direct commands are like sort of very clear that you need to do it and it sort of needs to happen immediately. So something like, please put the books in my hands. Please put all of the Legos into the container. Please return the iPad to the charging dock. Whatever it is, you need to do it. This is what you need to do and you need to do it now. Those sort of compliance is mandatory and immediate compliance is expected, that sort of thing. So, in a play context, we almost want to throw out any unnecessary commands of both indirect and direct nature. And what tends to happen if you're, in unstructured time where it doesn't really matter what the child's doing, whether because we're in play or because it's free time, whatever it is, we tend to use more of those indirect commands. Hey, why don't we build a really tall tower? So that's sort of like an indirect command. It's a suggestion, but it's, telling the child, it's directing the child's behavior. Because what that does then is it takes the lead over. That's my idea to build up a really tall tower. I'm taking over the play there, right? Which is in this type of sort of therapeutic, child-led, unstructured times. Again, we want the child to be in the lead. But at the core of why we want to avoid unnecessary commands, and I don't think this is just restricted to play or unstructured times, I think this could be like a general rule across the board, is that for our PCIT style kids, our kids who are often disruptive, they're being told what to do a lot. They're being questioned a lot. Why are you here? Where should you be? Have you put that away yet? Why did you get that out? Blah, 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 blah. And these kids, often become, quite compliance fatigued. They get into cycles where they hear a command and their almost automatic conditioned response is to not comply. And so what we want to try and do is, as much as possible, avoid that compliance fatigue and save our commands for when we need them. So if we don't need something done immediately, or it doesn't really matter what order they do things in, we don't need to sort of give instructions around that. And it's about, I guess, saving it for when you need it. And what we want to avoid doing is creating these opportunities for non-compliance about things you don't care about. So say we're in play and say, I want to build 3 towers in different colors. Can you pass me all of the red Legos? And the child ignores us because they've almost been conditioned to do that when an adult tells them what to do. Or they say, no, I'm using them. And it's like, that makes us feel frustrated because they're like, oh, God, again, they can't even do something simple like this. We have sort of this internal monologue that happens. The kids probably getting frustrated because it's like, my God, like, leave me alone. I just want to play this, right? So we've almost recreated the cycle that we're trying to fix. And over something that doesn't really matter. Who cares what happens in the play, right? So that command in that sense was unnecessary because no one is going to suffer if that particular thing doesn't get done, right? So that's why I say unnecessary commands, we can throw them out the window just to avoid those opportunities for non-compliance, particularly if our goal is to try and strengthen the relationship that's going to undermine that goal. So that's the first thing, unnecessary commands. Now, this is the hard thing, particularly for teachers. You all ask such good questions and you use questions so beautifully to encourage learning and critical thinking and coming to the answer by yourself. You're so good at it. And I don't want you to walk away from this with the take-home message that you shouldn't ask questions. Questions are bad. I'm not saying that at all. There are obviously incredibly valuable questions when you're teaching a concept, when you're checking that someone's understood something, when you're obtaining information, right? Unnecessary questions, though, do exist. Questions that we don't mean to be questions. This is really hard. When we were doing reflections, what often happens is that we turn it from a reflection into an unintentional question because our voice goes up at the end. So when Kelly said something like, "I'm going to build a really big tower," and we reflect that back, going, "Oh, you're going to build a really big tower?" And like the question mark is put in there because I've gone tower. And you could tell because Kelly would then respond by going, "Yeah, I am a big tower." Like she would answer the question, right? And so that question it's not necessary because she's already told us what she's doing, so we can just reflect that back. Ah, a big tower. So saying it with certainty, there's no demand then placed on Kelly. Who gets remember, Kelly's a PCIT kid. She's getting questioned a lot. She's having questions and commands coming at her left, right, and center. We want to get rid of any unnecessary demand so we can avoid that compliance fatigue. We didn't need that to be a question. We could just say it as a statement, and that's fine. Rapid fire questions can often be quite overwhelming for kids, not just PCIT kids, kids in general. So, okay, what are we going to build today? Do you think we should build a tower and should we make it all different colors? What color do you want to make it, on this side? So like that rapid fire question doesn't give a kid an opportunity to ask, and overwhelm them, and often they'll just slip into just not answering any of them. So that's, again, we've recreated that cycle, as well as those hidden commands that do you think we should back away now? That's a question, but really it's a Trojan horse because the commands answer the question, right? So they're sort of the unnecessary questions. So questions, good. We love questions when they're valuable, but questions that are unnecessary can, undermine our interactions sometimes. Not with most kids. Most kids are completely fine with answering questions, but other kids, particularly PCIT kids, it can be a struggle. So I probably covered a lot of these here already, but it does take the lead from the child. What are we going to build today? Do you think we should build a tower? Should we make it all red or all blue? That's me leading the conversation there, putting my ideas in. When we question kids a lot, they say something, Kelly says, "I'm going to build a tower," and we say, "Oh, you're going to build a tower?" Sometimes kids can infer that we're not really listening to them properly. They just told us and we've questioned them. Does that suggest that either we're not listening or that we don't agree with what they're doing, but we disapprove of what they're doing? So unnecessary questions have potential to undermine the interaction. So we try and avoid, I guess, is the takeaway message. So for example, were you being mean to Anthony? The subtext of that is like, don't be mean to Anthony, which we could then shift that into what do we want Luke to be doing instead? Please use your kind words with Anthony. We're playing, does the red one go there? Instead, we might say, just offer the solution. I think the blue one might fit there, right? That question wasn't necessary. Are you going to build a long fence? Looks like you're putting together the fence. Once again, this could be the situation we discussed before where the child said, "It's not a fence, it's a train." And you go, "Oh my gosh, it's a train." So again, it's not a necessary question because we can get that information just using statements that don't sort of place any demand on the kid. Who has finished their snack? I see Sally and Josh first who have finished their snack, and so on and so on. You have these slides so you can have a look through there. Basically turning unnecessary questions into statements or commands to either get the information we need, send the information we need to send, and to get the compliance that we're looking for. And kids then don't have to figure out what we're trying to get at. I guess that's a big part of unnecessary questions sometimes, is that there is that hidden meaning behind it. Some kids are very literal and they're not very good at sarcasm and they're not very good at inferring what we mean. So saying it straight up can be helpful. All right, so this is the last thing we'll talk about in the play context, which is avoiding negative or avoiding criticism or harsh words is another way of saying this. So we have avoid unnecessary commands, avoid unnecessary questions, and then avoid negative talk. So how would we define negative talk? Anything really, any verbalization or even like gesture, facial expression that expresses some sort of disapproval of the child, their characteristics, what they've done, what they've produced, the choices that they've made, right? We've all used negative talk with kids because we're humans and we have feelings and we tell kids when they've done well and when they've done not so well. And sometimes we've been sarcastic or sassy when we've done that. So you don't have to sort of share this, but even if you bring to mind a particular interaction you've had with a kid where you've walked away later that day or the next day and gone, I didn't love how that went. I probably sunk to their level, or that didn't make me feel good. They got quite upset, whatever. And we might come back to that a little bit later when we talk about something else. But we're human. We've all done this. And so it's completely normal. But, it can have some impacts on our goals, right, for this kid. The most counterintuitive one being that it can often increase the frequency of problematic behavior. So I think in our last talk, I gave an example of a parent who might be depressed. And so is really sort of flat, not very emotional, doesn't give a lot. But when the child does something, quote unquote, naughty, that's when the emotion comes out. That's when the parent yells or gets upset or gets close to them, brings them in, even if it's in an angry way. But that's meaningful to that kid. And so what happens is that actually increases, reinforcing, increases the frequency of the behavior. That's an extreme example. But if you're a time poor teacher who's not able to give sort of a lot of attention because, you have however many little people they're demanding it, potentially kids are doing these things because it does draw you in, even if attention is negative, even if you've said, oh my gosh, Johnny, we did that, you need to put up your hand or whatever it is. Maybe that attention is reinforcing to that kid. So could increase the frequency of the problematic behavior. That's when it becomes helpful to do one of those ABC, like functional analyses, to figure out if something like that could be operating in sort of the classroom dynamic there. In which case, then what you would do is try and use a preventative, I guess, and get ahead of it by going, okay, how do I structure in more bits of attention for this kid as an experiment to see then if that brings down the more attention-seeking disruptive behaviors. So that sort of analysis and then experiment with a different type of strategy. Obviously, it doesn't make kids feel good. Some kids' criticism roll off the back, water off a duck's back sort of thing. But for other kids, they can be very affected by being told don't, stop, no, or that you're doing the wrong thing, or that you need to be doing this better. The little deflated balloon can be affected by this, right? Interactions become unpleasant. I think that's a pretty self-obvious one. And the last one, which I think is quite cute, is that sarcastic. It can be confusing to some kids. My sister is really bad at sarcasm. And if I'm sarcastic, she'll often just take me at face value and be quite literal about it. Be like, oh my gosh, really? Who was being sarcastic? Come on, Paige. So not just children, adults as well, but children in particular, they are still developing their theory of mind and that idea that, you can say one thing and mean another. So sometimes it's confusing. So another couple of examples here. You're being nasty. Obviously, that's, a critical thing, a negative talk. How might we get that message across, but by emphasizing what we want the kid to be doing instead? Once again, you need to use your kind words with Anthony. See if that has the same effect. Not the red one. The red one doesn't go there. The blue one might fit better. Again, we're getting the same message across. We're getting the same outcome, but by removing that sort of critical, you did that wrong, you picked the wrong one, sort of subtext element. Stop poking her. Keep your hands to yourself. Johnny, stop talking. Again, that proximal praise. I like how Sophie is listening really quietly. That's what we need, quiet listeners. Johnny stops going, thank you, Johnny, for listening so quietly. In the best case scenario. You aren't allowed to play in that area. You need to go and play in the kindergarten section. Again, that critical element, you've done the wrong thing here. You're not doing what you're meant to be doing. We've removed that and just said what we need them to be doing instead, more of a teaching tool, and sort of so on there that you can have a look at.